Thanks for stopping by the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso, and we are glad that you're here. Today on our episode, we are interviewing Jeff Gargas. Jeff is an entrepreneur, business owner, husband and father. He's also the COO and co-founder of the Teach Better team. Now, on our episode today, Jeff shares an interesting perspective on education and how to look at teaching in a different way with better results. Jeff shares his journey. Actually, he was an adjunct professor while he was attending college, and he's got a very interesting story, and I know you're going to take many things away from his success journey. So on to the ascent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Success Ascent. My name is Pat Mancuso. I'm the creator and host of our show, and we are excited today to welcome a gentleman with us on our show today who's going to share a number of things about his entrepreneurial journey. He's going to talk to us about education, entrepreneurship, and you know, as you know, on the Success Ascent, many things come out of these conversations. So let me introduce Jeff Gargas to you. Jeff is the COO and co-founder of the Teach Better team and co-author of Teach Better, and we're going to hear a lot about that. He works with educators to increase student engagement and improve student success. Jeff previously owned an online marketing firm where he worked with entrepreneurs and small business owners. He is also a former adjunctive professor at Kent State University and spent 10 years in the music industry. I bet there's some interesting stories about that. So Jeff, welcome to our show today.
Thanks for having me on, Pat. I'm excited to be here. Really appreciate it, man. It's an honor.
Well, it's our pleasure. So Jeff, let's start with, who is Jeff? Like, how did Jeff get here?
Oh, well, that's a long story. I don't think you have enough time today for that one. It's been a winding, kind of crazy story, which is one of the things I love about it, I think. But Jeff is, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a father of two, and I'm a husband. But then I'm an entrepreneur, and my wife would probably tell you that sometimes that entrepreneur might go on top of the other two from time to time. But you know, I've been starting businesses and ideas and creating things for as long as I can remember. I've always had a hard time. I've always sort of considered like the day job, the 9-to-5 thing, that's my side hustle in a sense, because it's like my silent investor and all the other things that I'm doing. I've always had a lot of stuff going on, and now I am currently the COO and co-founder of the Teach Better team, or teachbetter.com, where I get to work with an amazing group of educators who work together to help other educators just be a little bit better every day for their students. And I get to sort of help control the ship, and alongside of that, I get to create a lot of stuff. I get to host or co-host our podcast and work with educators and stuff. And I'm just a 3-time college dropout trying to help educators teach better at this point. So,
okay, wait a minute, Jeff. You're teaching educators, and you're a three-time college dropout. I bet there's a story behind that.
Yeah, there's definitely stories behind it. That's part of the long line. Yeah, so one of the things that I really realized from being in education now for the last six years, and we work with school districts and educators, primarily K-12, but also in the collegiate level as well. And we do a lot of professional development, training, consulting, and work around there with teachers all over the world. And one of the things I really realized is I was a good student. I did well. I got A's and B's, but I also come from a really good family in a really good area. Didn't have a lot of struggle growing up. I was very privileged in a lot of ways and a lot of good things, which I'm very, very thankful for. But as I've looked back and gotten older and wiser, quote unquote, I've looked back and realized that going to college is probably not what I should have done. But when I graduated high school, that's what you did. You either went into the military and served the country, or you went to college to get a job and do that. And I wasn't ready for that. At that time, I wanted to be a rock star. I mean, I was playing in bands. I wanted to build, be the next John Bon Jovi, and then start a record label and stuff. But I tried to go to college because I had the opportunity to, and I floundered that opportunity a bunch. And then I've went back a couple times since, trying to finish what I started. But then something that I had started, a business, would be growing, and I'd say, I don't have time for that college stuff anymore. Right. So I'll focus on that. And I realized that I needed to really reflect and realize that that's not my path, right? That's the right path for a lot of people, but not for me. And so it's interesting. And especially since in the middle of the mix there, I was actually an adjunct professor at Kent State University at the same time that I was a college dropout from Kent State University. But I was teaching it was an upper elective course in the music industry, and I was currently in the music industry, so it was how I was able to work it. But that's always a fun story to tell still.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I mean, that's interesting. So I dropped out of college and I'm teaching at college.
Yes.
So here's what I heard you say, which a lot of entrepreneurs say, and I think it's really important for us to understand that as an entrepreneur, it's all about passion. And it sounds like you weren't as passionate about college as you were about other things. And I think sometimes people go down the path of what they think is right for them or what others think is right for them, and instead of pursuing that passion. So,
Yeah.
so you did that. You decided to pursue your passion, and so talk about what brought you to the company that you co-founded, because the story I watched some things online. It's a pretty interesting story. So from an entrepreneurial perspective, how did that become what it's become today?
Yeah, so that's a fun story that kind of ties into some of the backstories. But I had honestly gotten to the point where I was kind of hitting myself saying, I don't think I'm gonna keep, like, no more ideas, right? No more crazy dreams, no more chasing that. I got to figure out and just settle in. I had my first kid, and was married in a house and all that stuff. And I was like, I gotta. And everyone had been telling me for a long time, quit with all the craziness. You
The
got to grow up
dreams
and
on
get
the
a
back
job.
burner, take responsibility,
Yeah, and
grow up.
yeah, and so I'm working with I'm doing online marketing at the time, and a buddy of mine, Chad Ostrowski, calls me, and the cool story about that is that I met Chad when I managed his band when I owned a record label years ago, and he was a drummer in a band. That's how we met. After the label went down, I coached soccer for a little while. He was a goalie in college, so he worked with my goalies and we became friends. But then he went off to be a teacher, and I went off this other way. Well, during this time, Chad started to was a good teacher, but found himself having the worst year of his life, of his teaching career, and had to find a way. Essentially, he'll tell you that it was the worst year of his teaching career. He got to the point where he had to either figure out how to teach better, or he had to quit being a teacher because he wasn't doing it good by his students, but he was also struggling himself. And he created for himself out of necessity what we now call the GRID method, which is a framework for implementing student-centered, self-paced mastery learning in any classroom with any curriculum. And started really
slow down again and say that one more time, because you said that really quick, and I'm
sorry,
guessing
yeah.
it's gold, and it's like I heard the GRID method, and then so what is the GRID method?
So the GRID method, it's a framework that educators can use, they can implement in their classroom, that allows for and helps them implement student-centered, self-paced mastery learning. So, I'll try to do the quick overview of that. It's mastery learning, self-paced, that type of stuff. It's really a shift of the role of educators from being the deliverer of content to being the facilitator of learning, and the shift from focusing on time and seats and task completion to actual understanding knowledge. So it's no longer, do I care if Pat finished worksheet 2.1? It's, did Pat take away what he was supposed to from doing that? Then it doesn't really even matter whether you finished it or not. Did you learn what you're supposed to learn? And so it's this big shift, and it gives a lot of ownership of their journey back to the students and a responsibility. And it's a big shift, but Chad started doing it on his own, because what he did was looked at the data for the challenges he had in his classroom. He looked at the research, and the research all pointed towards mastery learning, but there was no like easy way to implement it, because it's kind of, if you think about it, Pat, think about 30 kids in a classroom all moving at their own pace, potentially doing 30 different things. It's like what nightmares are made of, right? So he found a way for himself to organize it, make it work. Then it started catching on to teachers that worked with him and his mentors and all these different things. So he reached out to me because he was essentially, basically getting stopped in the hallway every day with questions, and he wanted to help his colleagues and stuff and the other students. So he came to me and said, hey, I've got this new thing that I've been doing. It's working really, really well. I'd like to put together an ebook, because I think if I put it online somewhere, maybe like they can all go read it there and get the bulk of it, and then I can just like answer follow-up questions instead. And the story that we tell, and actually mentioned a book, I tell the story in the book about driving around in circles in the rain at night. Listen to him tell me not only what it did for his students, but what it was doing for him as a teacher and then as a father and a husband, just changing his life. And we met up and we talked about it. And my sort of, famous words within the team is, I looked at him, I said, dude, we're not just doing an ebook. Like we have to do more. And so we started creating content and building that. And that's sort of how we got here now. And since then, we built a nice team. We got about 18 on our team right now. And,
Wow.
it's been a crazy journey to say the least. And we do so much more than the grid method. That's where it all started. But then I kind of refer to, that's kind of like our Big Mac. It's what a lot of people know us for, but we do so many other things in education and training and professional development and stuff now.
So let's talk about that entrepreneurial journey. So you got 18 people today in your organization. That's a good sized company. I mean, having responsibility for making sure that, revenue is there and growth is there and service is there. And so let's talk about the company itself. How many schools, people, how do you measure who you're serving right now?
So there's a couple ways in which we serve. So, you can look at number of teachers,
okay,
based on those that are, running the grid method in their classroom or running something else that we've, one of our other proprietary systems like the Teach Further model, or that we've been working with that are taking our online courses that are in our network because they're learning and growing with us. That is in a number I can't really, we can't really track that all, right? Because there are teachers all over the world that utilize the grid method. And it seems like every day we're getting a contact from someone that we didn't realize. We're like, oh, didn't realize we had teachers in Oklahoma. That's cool. Didn't realize we had teachers in India. That's neat. And so it's hard for us to quantitate that. Schools that we're actually partnered with. So when we work with a school, it can go anywhere from like a 60, 90 minute, like quick overview session to a 1 or 2 day workshop. Or what we really want to do is work with them for a 3 to 5 year plan of strategically changing the way they operate and the way they teach. So when you look at our partner schools, we have schools in Ohio. Our biggest areas are Ohio and Illinois, just for whatever reason. But we have schools as far out as California, Texas, let's see, down in North Carolina, down in Georgia, over in New Jersey, New Hampshire. So around, but definitely Ohio, which is where I'm at, and Illinois, which is just an area that caught on, and where one of our other leaders now, Ray Hewitt, is at. So those are our primary spots that were there. So.
Okay. So what have you learned, in your entrepreneur journey, like starting a company? What surprised you in starting the company and growing the company? Like what has surprised you?
I think one of the biggest things with all my companies is how much cash actually really matters. Like you always hear that, right? When you're younger, cash flow, like cash is king, right?
Yeah.
You learn it, you hear about it, and you read about it when you're younger, and you start investing, you start researching business. It's like cash king. You're like, I don't know, I got a great idea, right? Or I got stamina. I'm young. I'm going. I'll make it happen, or whatever. I'll just raise a bunch of money. But when you actually focus on that and you bootstrap everything, you run your company much differently. And that's where we're at. Like we've bootstrapped everything. Everything started with Chad's huge salary as a teacher. And me as a struggling entrepreneur at that point. Like, I mean, we didn't have a lot. We started with very, very low cash. And what that's allowed us to do is run a very, very lightweight company as far as bottom line goes, where, our largest expense is salaries, not office space or software and things of that nature. We run a pretty lightweight and therefore agile company because of that. But also with that, we also aren't controlled by, we aren't chained to someone else's wishes and demands. We're able to run and build things the way we want to. And I think that and the focus on and the power of patience has really been a big thing that I've learned because of the way we market, because we didn't have the money to just infuse in it right away. We worked and we ran a content marketing and Content Inc. Help versus sell model for marketing, where we just created a ton of content. We didn't run any ads. I think now in 6 years, I think we ran a total of maybe $500 worth of ads across all platforms. And most of that was us just like testing key phrases, which is a very small amount of money if you think, across 5 years. And some people run that in a day. So very small, but we've grown really well. And we've done it through this model of creating valuable content and opt-ins and creating those funnels and building those things, but giving away so much more value than we ever asked for a long time. And what we've been able to do is create this really great relationship with our network where now schools like to call us. People like to give us a call, which is a lot better sales call, as you know, Pat, right? When someone calls you. And so I think, but that model takes a lot of patience. I always talk when I talk to like younger entrepreneurs, like trying to hustle, hustle, hustle. Like I'm creating content, I've been putting out blog posts, I've been doing videos, and it's like, how long have you been doing that for? For like 3 months. And I'm like, whoa. It was month 14 before we got our first opt-in form success on our website. Like now we were doing other things. We were out at conferences and stuff like that, but that was the first actual opt-in. I said, guess what? In month 15, we didn't get that much more. Right. And so it's a patience thing. And I think so often we've built our company by listening to our audience. Yeah. And in order, if you're going to do that and you actually do that, you really have to be patient. And I think one of the things I never was in all my other ventures was patient, which is why I always had a million going, because I was trying to find the one that was going to explode really quick.
Yeah.
And this is the first time I kind of went, everything else shuts down and I'm going to follow it. So,
well, and what you just said that kind of intrigued me was you came from a marketing company background. So it'd be really easy for you with that type of mindset to push a whole bunch of stuff out really quick. So you actually maybe took what you learned in the marketing company and used that to slow down a little bit.
Yeah, I always joke that we have been the client that I wish I always had. Because we've said yes to everything that I had as ideas, because it was just easy. Because we had this thing where, like, when we started, Chad and I balanced each other out, because there was just, I don't even know how it happened, but this inherent trust. He trusted me on the business side and I trusted him on the education side. And we both grew and learned as we went. And so I was the client that I wish I would have had. And, when you look at our SEO growth, it's like a pitch perfect what it was supposed to be, which makes me want to go back and show it to all my old clients and be like, look, I told you, but that's a whole other story.
So as the COO running a company, and I love the fact that you brought up cash flow, because a lot of entrepreneurs struggle even to understand the financials, right? You ask them what their balance sheet looks like, their income statement, and they go, well, that's not my deal. I got somebody else doing that. And they never look at it. So they don't even know if they're making a profit, right? They don't even know how long they can survive. And boy, there were some companies in the beginning of the year that came to reality pretty quick with the change in the market. And we're going to come back to that. But share with me what you've learned as the COO, co-founder of the company, in growing it. Like, what's been the biggest challenge in your growth of the company?
I'm going to harp back to the word patience. That's probably the best lesson I've learned, but it's also the biggest challenge, because when you get a little, it's just human nature to want a lot.
Right.
And you have this little bit of success and it's really, and you're like, oh, this is it now, right? It's going to go now. And then it doesn't. And that brings me back to this patient, but also kind of goes back to an old mentor of mine used to tell us, don't, I call it the roller coaster. Don't ride the roller coaster, right? Of, he would draw on the chalkboard of up and down, right? Oh, I've got 15 appointments. Oh, six of them canceled, and this up and down of feeling good, feeling horrible. And then he'd draw a line down the middle and said, that's who wins. And so this patience of staying steady, don't get too excited, don't get too down. Not that we've always followed that advice. I've let myself ride it plenty, but that's been a huge thing for us, and staying focused so that we can continue to do what we said we were going to do, which was focus on helping teachers help kids. So focusing on the mission, making every decision based on the mission, not just based on cash flow, but are we actually doing it the right thing? And are we doing it for the right reasons? Are we listening to our audience? Are we creating what they're saying they want? Are we solving problems that they're saying that they need solved?
Right.
And it's okay if we're not moving as fast as we dreamt we would on day one. Now, all that being said, with going back to the cash flow, always looking at where you're at. And, we really, this year is probably the first, well, no, this year, I take it back. It's 2020. We've definitely looked at it this year. But we've looked at a little, we were looking at a little bit less, but for so long, for pretty much the entire time of the company, like Chad and I and Ray, we speak in terms of like months until we run out of cash, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So we're always looking at cash flow, and it's not even like, oh, how do we do this? I'm like, I don't care about that. I'm looking at, when do we run out of cash and are we going to be okay? And still after 6 years, that's how we look at it. Yeah. That distance has gotten a lot longer, but that's how I'm always looking at it. Even though we've now been able to secure things like lines of credit and stuff like that, so we have extra, I always look, but when do we have to touch that? Because that's the safety.
Well, it's a great way to look at it, right? I mean, it's a great way to look at it, particularly when you're looking at it on a monthly basis, if you may, and you're always taking that snapshot. So, I want to talk a little bit about the education piece, because, my background is a trainer and a coach and a consultant, and I always, it intrigues me, right? So you're doing some great stuff for schools. and yet we hear a lot the struggles with the schools, right? With, different pieces, about how they struggle. And so, like, what's been your biggest surprise in working with educators or working with school districts? Like, what, from an entrepreneur perspective?
For me, across the whole 6 years has been how often I can connect problem solution tendencies, whatever you want to call it, in the classroom and the school to businesses in the crossover. You kind of touched on it, how you're a trainer. Right. And it's crazy to see how connection there are. There's a lot of things when we look at like the grid method and the way we run this and mastery learning. If you look at franchised restaurants like your McDonald's, Arby's, that stuff, they're already gridded, right? They're already in mastery learning. They have a very systematic approach to where they want their staff members to get. That's your standards, right? Your state standards. And then they have a path for how you get there. And you get a little star every time you move by, right? That's students moving at their own pace, because some of those people are going to skyrocket up to key holder or shift manager or assistant manager. Some of them are going to take a little bit longer because they struggle with taking orders or whatever it might be, right? So there's just so many little connections. And then also these little connections of like, these are the common conversations going on with politics in the school. I'm like, oh, that's great. That happens in office buildings too, and in restaurants, and in everywhere else. And it's been interesting. I've done a lot of things as I was creating a lot of things. So I have a variety of experiences in different industries, which has been really cool to then connect it. So I think that's probably one big of my, I don't know why, I just had this like, oh, teachers and education is like this whole other world, but there's so many similarities that I think has helped us a lot in a lot of ways.
Well, it's interesting because, when you look at, like, I'll have conversations with, people, and we'll talk about sales, and they'll go, well, I'm not in sales. Well, everybody's in sales. Like your church or place of worship is in sales, right? I mean, everybody's in sales. And if you really think about it, every business is in education.
Absolutely. Well, they should be.
Well, whether that's educating their consumer, the end user, or educating their employee or their team.
Absolutely. Yep.
I mean, they're all, it's all an education process. So touch just like for a minute or two. I know you probably can't, and it's not doing service to it, but you've mentioned the grid method a couple of times. Sure. Like, what's the big piece of the grid method that somebody might look and say, well, I could apply that to my business outside of education?
Sure. Yeah. So the big pieces of the grid method is that it's a really in-depth look and an alignment between. So teachers have to work within what we call state standards, right? That's what the state has said. Hey, your kids should know this, X, Y, Z. And there's a bunch of them, right? They go across. There's some that are very specific to content. Some of them are behavior. They need to learn how to read, write, look at maps, things like that. But they also need to learn like the properties of this, the properties of that, and so, teachers have to create lesson plans all the time, but so often we're going to make them sit in the seat for this long and we're going to make them do X, Y, Z versus we need to focus on this is what they're going to learn. And so the biggest thing with the grid method is that it's self-paced. So the students are going to move through the content as they can learn it versus we covered it today and whether Pat gets it or not, we're moving on tomorrow, right? Because what happens in that scenario is if I say, Pat, what's 2 + 2? And you say 8, and I say, well, you didn't get it, but we're moving on to multiplication tomorrow, you're done for. You're never going to catch up, which is what has happened for so long.
Right.
This is a shift to, okay, great, Pat, you didn't get it, but, Janet did. So she gets to move. She's going to move on because she can move on now. You and I are going to spend some time, or you're going to retry this until you get it. And so kids are going to move at their own pace. That's a big shift. The other big shift and big thing that we work with is just breaking down those standards and making sure that everything we're doing in our class and everything the students are going through aligns with that and actually leads to that goal, that standard. And then we work. So a grid, if you want to picture it, can encompass essentially like a unit. So it could be 2, 3, 4 weeks worth of time in a typical classroom. Okay. And the grid itself, you can picture just a sheet of paper that the student will actually get and own. And it's got these blocks that scaffold up and they start at the bottom and move to the top. And they're starting at the bottom with the foundational. And it's based on something that we call Webb's depth of knowledge, DOK. And there's levels. And as students move left to right through these boxes, these squares on the grid, which we call learning opportunities, which are essentially the activities they're doing in the class, they're getting checked more often and on smaller things to make sure that we're catching them earlier on, versus we spend 2 weeks and Johnny fails the test and we're like, well, he didn't get it, but what didn't he get altogether? Right. Instead, maybe we're catching right off the bat that Johnny didn't get 2 + 2 and we can fix that. So now he does better when he gets here. So it's this breakdown. So I'm trying to get there without going forever in this. So the biggest thing is this, it's a shift from them moving at the pace that they need. Like, think about when we learn how to walk.
Right.
No one walks in the same amount of time, right? And we don't just give up on the kids if it's been a year instead of, 8 months. We work with them differently. But as soon as we put kids into education, we're like, nope, everyone learns exactly the same way at the exact same time, or else you're a bad kid or not teachable or dumb, right? Yeah.
Well, it's almost like what you're doing is it's more of outcome perspective versus check off the box perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
I love that. So, so let's shift gears. As an entrepreneur, what's the best advice you've ever been given?
Focus on helping people. Actually, the best piece of advice I ever got, I didn't realize it was the best piece I've ever got until long after I stopped working with this guy who I consider a mentor. He used to tell this, I was in sales at the time. I was actually in financial services, insurance and stuff. And he used to always tell us, if you focus all your energy on helping other people, you're turning around one day and there'll be a big pile of cash behind you. At the time, he was trying to motivate us young guys with cash.
Right.
But as I got older and I reflected back on him as a person, I'm like, I don't think that's actually what he meant. When he was saying big cash behind you, he was talking about purpose, success, happiness, fulfillment. And I have held on to that to so much. And that's embedded in our team, that you focus on helping people and you'll turn around one day and they'll be there. And when Chad and I got started, I told him, he's like, well, how are we going to do this? I'm like, we're going to give it all away. He's like, well, what do you mean? You just said in the last sentence that you think we can make some money. And I said, we will, way down the road. It came sooner than I thought, thankfully. Yeah. But I told him, I said, I want somebody to be able to come to the website, take the course, download some blogs, download a couple checklists, whatever, talk to us, and be able to go effectively run the grid method in hers or his classroom without ever paying us a dime. I said, if we do that the right way with enough people, the schools will call us.
Right.
And it took a long time, but they did, and they do. Yeah. And we do some, we do some cold stuff now, and we do direct to teachers, stuff like that. But primarily that it still works. And it's come from the fact that everything we do, we are looking to help, and we're trying to help, not because it's a tactic, but because it's who we are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to the success that we've had so far.
Well, and I'm sure that you see the results of the kids and the impact that it has, and you go, you can't put a price on that, right?
I've had so many moments, Pat, where I look at Chad or I look at Ray, and I'm like, you know what? Like, something happens, and I'm like, if it falls apart tomorrow, I don't even care, because that was worth it right there. And to me, I'm like, there's been enough of those. Hopefully, there's a whole bunch more, but
absolutely.
But absolutely.
So let's flip that upside down, like I do to do on the show. What's the worst advice? Like the worst advice that you've given that, thank goodness, maybe you listened to it, hopefully you didn't.
Stop chasing stupid dreams. I think that's the really advice I've got, which I know that's probably very cliche.
Yeah.
But I come from a town, small town, where we all knew each other, and there's a lot of people that have done some amazing things in life, and they're super successful and are incredible. And a lot of them got to success long before I did, because I was chasing stupid dreams. Yeah. And a lot of people told me to stop chasing stupid dreams out of love. 9 out of 10 of them was because they were worried about me. Some maybe not. But I do, regardless, I still think that was the worst advice, because I wouldn't be where I am right now had I stopped that.
Well, that's exactly true.
That's a big one,
right? I mean, you wouldn't be where you are today, and what you've developed and in all the things you put together, that came from your experiences, good or bad, successful or not successful. And, it's funny because it's been said on this show a handful of times. And again, I'm going to say it, when people give us that advice, they're attempting to limit us at less than they see themselves. It's kind of like they want us to live their life, and then they tell us so. And when people buy into that, it just never gets them where they want to get to. So thank goodness you didn't listen to that advice, Jeff. Because that's not good advice. I've heard it so many times on our show. It's crazy. So, we're kind of coming to the end. I didn't prepare you for this one. However, I do want to ask you, what book are you reading or have you read recently that you would recommend to entrepreneurs or business owners?
I'm actually back into a book called The Go-Giver.
Oh, sure.
By Bob Burg. I've read it. I don't know how many times I've read it. This will be my third time listening to it.
Okay.
Second time this year. And I actually have. I'm looking over here. I have a. I don't know what it is like. It's like 2.5 foot, maybe 3 foot by 3 foot vinyl quote, and I have like 9 more of them from the book. It's one of my favorite books.
Okay.
It's an older book, but it still
Yep.
stands true. And so I've been reading that one right now. That's one that I've been diving into. So
So
again,
one last question, and then I'm going to ask you for your final thoughts. So with COVID, with the pandemic, we've all had to make shifts, and we're recording this at a time where we're probably going to need to make some more shifts here relatively soon.
Yep.
Unfortunately. So what have you learned in pivoting and going through that, or what have you experienced that you could share with the entrepreneurs and business owners listening?
Yeah, so I swear I'm not trying to repeat myself again and again, but patience and listening to your audience. We actually just had our sort of end of the year roundup this past weekend, and we did some celebrations, and I love that I had as my number one celebration the way we pivoted back in March, April, but I didn't even get to say it because a bunch of our team said it for me. And the fact that, we were actually, I was on my way, I was in a car on the way to Chicago where we were flying. We were all meeting because a bunch of our team is actually Illinois, but we have team members in Washington State and New Jersey and Michigan. And we were flying everyone in. We were all going into Chicago to spend the weekend together. And we're on our way there, Chad and I and one of our other team members from Ohio. And that was on the Friday so Ohio, we were the first state to shut down K through 12 schools pretty quickly. But on our way out, like I think it was like 8 or 9 or 12 or something like that, other states started shutting it down. And listening to the radio on the way out is like something from an apocalyptic movie where like the world was shutting down. And we're on our way out, and I have a contact that actually works with the CDC, and they finally texted me and said, "I think you should cancel your meetings." And I'm like, "Oh shoot," because it's not someone who normally likes to give advice because
Yeah.
But he texted me and said, "You should do that." And so we did. And so Chad and I still went, and Ray, who's our other leader in the team, like we still got together in the middle. By the way, we're in downtown Chicago, and basically the news is like, "Hey, don't go to downtown Chicago on that day." But we were there, and we met, and we said, "Okay, what do we do?" And the first thing we did was we shut down all sales. We turned everything off. No more cold emails, no more cold calls. Our salesperson, who was actually the guy that was in the car with us, were like, "Hey, you don't do anything for a few weeks." Like, just nothing. And we shut it down. We said, okay, we need to flip everything 100% to support because our teachers are going to need this more than ever. So we started, one of the things we kicked in is we started going live every morning, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern time, no matter what, just live for about an hour. We had guests on, whatever. We were just there as to be a constant for them and to be there in case they needed to complain, to vent, to freak out, whatever. And we ended up doing that for, I don't know, 3 months. And we didn't follow up on any of the leads. We followed up with, "Are you guys okay?
Right.
Do you need anything? Let us know." But we didn't push anything. And that to me was the best thing we did because we saw a lot of people that do a lot of the similar things that we do go under, go just on the tack of sales because they started freaking out because of their bank account. And they started doing, we were really, really patient and then listened to our audience to tell us that they were ready now to have those conversations. And we took that time to shift all of our training because most of our revenue is in-person training. So it was a massive hit. Yes. Also, we get a decent amount of revenue from speaking and going to conferences. So we actually lost 23% of our projected revenue for this year over 3 calls, and they all came in 1 week. Right then, we lost it right away. Like I actually had a conversation in May with Chad where I said, and we talked and we strategized on fixing up our resumes because we were like, this is directly impacting our business and our schools. Anyway, the biggest thing, not to go on, see, everyone has to be patient with me on this too, see, is that we were really patient. We listened for them to say, okay, we need help. And during that time, we shifted everything to virtual. So we figured out how we were going to do that. And we said, okay, what are they going to need now based on the conversations we have? Because it's going to change. And so then we were able to help them with how do we get ready to come back better in the fall? How do we get ourselves ready so that no matter what the fall looks like, because none of us had any ideas, some of us still don't have any ideas, to be ready no matter what. And we did a really, really nice job doing that. In July, August, September, our schedules were packed with business. We're actually having the best year we've ever had, the best profit we've ever had, the best growth we've ever had. We doubled the size of our team this year. Thankfully, we were just in a spot where, thankfully, we had the cash reserve where we could survive for a while without it. And that comes back to the, our earlier conversation about having that is really, really important, because you never know. Apparently, you never know when a pandemic's going to hit. So
let's hope there's no more in our lifetime.
Yeah, no kidding, right? But it's been a really interesting year for us to look back and be like, okay, well, as of right now, we survived it. Hopefully 2021's the same, or we continue to grow and we can look back and be like, yeah, we survived the pandemic of 2020 and we were in education, and that's kind of crazy. So.
There's one thing I want to share with our listeners, Jeff, because this came up in one of my conversations with one of our clients today. In fact, a couple of them. It feels like there's people who are getting a little tired. Like, we thought we were over this. We thought we were out of it. In fact, I think a lot of people went to a new normal, like, other than masks. I mean, a lot of the normalcy has come back, right? I mean, no, you can't go to movie theaters with 50 or 100 people. No, there's not sports, nor there's not football games. But, I mean, economy has bounced back. There's still a lot of people that are out. My point is this, is the conversations we had this morning is our people are tired. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. How are you operating right now versus how you were operating in March? And the aha moment was, we've kind of got back to operating pre-pandemic. And I think we've got to right now come back into this, at least to prepare that we know that it's coming, that we are going to go back for some changes. What they look like, hard to say, just if it's just caring about your people. Because I think we've kind of gotten so busy in some aspects, we've forgotten about that. So
and I think we'll bounce back. But unfortunately, I do think I think over the next 3, maybe even 6 months, we're gonna see more businesses go under. Unfortunately, we're gonna see more spikes and shutdowns, and it's gonna happen, and we'll see how we handle it. But it's I agree. I think you need to be operating right now as if we're in a pandemic, because we still are. We're going to be, and you need to be operating right now strategically for as if we're going to be in a pandemic in 12 to 18 months, because we probably will be.
It's
That's
really
just the reality.
How people are looking, the mindset around the vaccine and what that looks like, and it's very interesting. Well, Jeff, first of all, you've been amazing today, and I know there's a number of things that I took away from the conversation. So as we close it out, what would be one final thought you would give, one learning lesson, just anything to the folks that are listening to our show today?
I think three really important things. One is, if you're not, become really, really self-aware to what you're doing, why you do it, what you're good at, what you're not at, and where you are. Like, why are you going to college? Is it because that's what's best for you? Is it because your parents said you should? Why are you not going to college? Is it because you think it's best for you, or because it really is, right? Why are you chasing what it was? Like, I thought I wanted to be in music business, and I had to be, or else I didn't even care. I didn't want to live. But what I realized is that, no, I just really want to help people chase whatever they want to chase, whatever they want to be better at. The second thing is, I've said it a million times, is patience. Whether it's patience to get through a pandemic, whether it's patience to get that first opt-in, or whether it's patience to get to the success you want to have because of the people you see on Instagram versus what's actually going to happen in your new business. Like, you have to be patient with that. And then the last one is focus on helping people. No matter what you do, figure out how what you do helps people. And for some things that's harder to do than for others, but figure out what you're doing and how it helps people, and then tell that story to people so that you can do that. So,
well, great advice, Jeff. And I think somewhere in the title for this podcast, the word patience is going to be in there. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to have that in there. So I want to thank you. And for our listeners, as you know, we love having your support, and, go to your favorite podcast source, subscribe to The Success Ascent, or you can go to thesuccessascent.com and subscribe there as well. Jeff, again, thank you so much. For everybody, thanks all of our listeners. And as I say, be safe, be healthy, and be happy. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Pat.
My pleasure, Jeff. Thank you. If you've not yet subscribed, please go to your favorite podcast source and subscribe to The Success Ascent, or simply go to www.thesuccessascent, and that's ASCENT.com, thesuccessascent.com. Thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to catching you on the next ascent.